Pac, we've spent a bunch of time talking about who Carolina might get in the transfer portal or who to get to reclassify, or maybe if one of the freshmen could be the starting power forward for this upcoming season. But is it possible that the potential starting power forward has been under our noses this whole time?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Wednesday, May 24th, 2023. Welcome in to the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. Joining me as he does every Wednesday on the show, our guy, Coach Pac Kilby, hanging out with us midweek. It's always great, especially because today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege, listen, they're going to throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. Pac, makes sense to me. I wore them all around New York City last weekend. These things are so comfortable. So coming up on today's show, I kind of hinted at it in the cold open, but Pac and I are going to take a look at, could Jalen Washington be the starter at the 4? I feel like we've just basically held it at arm's length. No, that's not going to happen. That's not a thing. But I do think it's worthy of us having a good in-depth conversation about it. I think a lot of people saw that video that came out last week, Pac, and have been like, ooh, what's going on there? So later in the show, we're going to talk about that video. But Pac, anytime I'm making a decision in my life, I like to make a decision and then live in the reality of that. What does that feel like? What does it look like? What are the pros and cons? And that's essentially what I want us to do in this first part of the show today with thinking about Jalen Washington as the starting 4, the starting power forward. Let's imagine that that's the reality. That's what Carolina is rolling out. And then think about what that looks like. So let's just talk about it in terms of what are the pros of doing that and what are the cons of doing that. I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Well, there's some pros. I think Jae'lyn obviously is a really good shooter. In the small sample size we got to see him in his freshman year, we saw he was real comfortable at that 15-foot mark, just playing face up and knocking that shot down. Comfortable from the free throw line. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, has he hit a 3 in a Carolina uniform?
No.
Maybe just one?
He's probably hit one in a Carolina uniform, but not in a Carolina uniform in a game.
Okay. So he hasn't proven that yet, but I think we all kind of know he can do that. Given that we know that, I think that it provides us with the shooting that we're looking for, 15 foot and out. I think another pro is he's got length. He has size. So just because, we've talked about he could play as the 5 for Carolina. We've mentioned that before. He could play the backup for Bacot. So we know he has 5 level size, but in this instance, we're talking about him playing at the 4. So he's big, for that spot, which is going to help with rim protection. It's going to help with rebounding. Obviously, we've mentioned he can stretch the floor. So there's a lot of pros to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting because under Roy Williams, it's like this would have been the no-brainer. We would be saying, yes, Jalen Washington will start at the 5 alongside Armando Bacot. It's just, is that a thing under Hubert Davis? I think one of the pros is that we haven't really seen a fully healthy Jalen Washington yet. He's still, it takes so long to recover from the type of injuries and surgery he's had. I think about Ronald Acuna Jr. I'm a big Braves fan who, even after coming back from ACL surgery, was not himself the entirety of last baseball season. And now, after a fully healthy offseason, is tearing up the entire major leagues right now and making everyone else look silly. And so it's with that year of kind of playing, getting up to speed, and then this fully healthy offseason, I'm wondering if perhaps there's a speed or a gear from Jalen Washington that we haven't seen yet. is there the requisite foot speed that he could utilize to play the 4 in a Hubert Davis system? That's a potential pro, but I think the unknown of that is maybe a con.
Yeah, for sure. That's it's why it's really tough to be in our spot right now and try to dissect this and try to figure it out when there are, like you said, there are a lot of unknowns. I like Jalen Washington a lot. I think his potential is really, really high. I think his potential is first-round draft pick in the NBA. I really do, because he's kind of that prototypical stretch big that is not just limited to 15 foot and in. So I think he's got a lot of potential, but there's a lot, like you mentioned, that we don't know. And then when you really get to looking at it, like you brought up foot speed, is how well does he move with quickness laterally? You start looking at those things, you go, okay, is he going to be a liability on defense? Because a lot of teams do play 4 around 1. So, essentially he's going to have to guard somebody on the perimeter. And could that be a problem? We could say yes for now, but ultimately I don't think we really could, because we don't know yet. So right. There's a lot of question marks that come with Jae'lyn, but what we do know is that he does bring shooting, he brings size, he brings length, he brings rebounding, he brings rim protection. I think he runs the floor pretty well, which is kind of a Carolina staple. So he does bring a lot of positive.
And a hard worker to boot. I mean, clearly anyone who's worked back from what he's kind of gone through at the end of his high school career clearly is someone dedicated enough to put the time in to get their body to where it needs to be. But, then the question becomes like, do you trust it? There's that sports psychology of, hey, I'm getting my lower body back to where I don't have to think about it and I just react as an athlete. So, Pac, let me ask it to you this way before we move on into the next portion of our conversation. Do you see this as a reality as we sit here in late May, right, with many months to go before we would even have to know if this is a reality? Do you see a world in which we look up in early November and Jalen Washington legitimately is starting at the power forward for the North Carolina Tar Heels in 23-24?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a world where that's a reality. I mean, this is how I look at it, and I don't know if I'm right, wrong, or indifferent, but I'll share with you kind of real quickly the 3 scenarios I foresee for North Carolina.
Interesting. Do it.
Number 1, an Elliot Cadeau reclassification, which means we start 3 guards. Harrison Ingram plays at the 4, and Armando Bacot plays at the 5. So there's one scenario. Scenario 2 looks more like Jae'lyn Withers starts at the 4, or we get a Jarin Stevenson reclassification. Number 3 would be that Jalen Washington starts at the 4. So to me, those are kind of the 3 scenarios that I see as possibilities for North Carolina. So essentially, that's a 33.3% chance that happens. So I think you have to look at it as it's a potential reality for North Carolina. And I like a couple of the other, or one of the other options better, just to be honest with you. But I think a healthy Jalen Washington can be problematic for a lot of people. So I don't want to misconstrue that. I think he can be a really good player and help us moving forward.
Interesting. Well, what I want to do next is look at what if it is that reality, what is Carolina's starting lineup? And I want to talk about that with and without Elliot Cadeau. What does that look like? And then beyond that, what does it mean for the rotation and the depth for the Tar Heels? And that's going to be an interesting conversation. And by the way, listeners, watchers, we want to know what you think. Like, if Jalen Washington is a starter, what does the rest of the starting lineup and the bench depth look like? So get your answers ready as well, and make sure you let us know that. But before we have that conversation, I need to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Bird Dogs. As we move into the summer and short season, like I said earlier, I just got a couple pairs of Bird Dogs for myself for the first time, and I tell you, usually I'm just like, yeah, whatever with shorts, but with bird dogs, man, it's a different story. I look forward to days where I am wearing my bird dogs shorts. I love the way they fit. I love the way I feel when I'm wearing them. They have this like stretchy fabric that's super comfortable, much more so than my other shorts or pants. And on top of that, bird dogs are versatile. They work in all sorts of environments, whether athletic or, getting a little more dressed up, whatever it is, bird dogs work. And they're super practical. Like this room I record in, it often gets really hot. There's not good airflow, but bird dogs keep me cool and it feels nice. And then I can focus on hanging out with Pac and talking to you fine folks as well. So if you want to feel the same, why don't you go on over to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter promo code lockedoncollege, a reminder, they're going to throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every single order. Go get some bird dogs today. You won't be disappointed. Okay, Pac, as we look forward, we're talking about the potential of a reality of Jalen Washington being the starting power forward for North Carolina. Just a reality that, frankly, you and I have not spent much time processing or thinking about, but I think it would be foolish of us to not at least do so. And so my question to you, and I want us to both answer this, is if Jalen Washington is in the starting lineup at the power forward position, who are the other four starters? Let's start there.
Well, I think you got RJ at the 1, Cormac at the 2, Harrison at the 3, Jae'lyn obviously at the 4, and then Armando at the 5. That would be my projection for what I think the starting lineup would look like if Jae'lyn is at the 4.
I'm exactly there. I've got nothing different. Now, is that are you suggesting that with or without Elliot Cadeau on the roster?
That's without. That's assuming the roster is as it is now.
Okay. What if Elliot Cadeau does decide to come? What would you keep it the same or would you change it?
Whew, buddy. I think you got to change it just because I don't think. I mean, I know actually. I think you say pretty confidently Elliot Cadeau is not coming to come off the bench. So I'd say put him at the 1, RJ Davis at the 2, Ingram at the 3, Washington at the 4, and Bacot at the 5.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, the biggest struggle for me, because I think it's like if Jalen's starting, Mondo definitely is. And so the questions become 1 through 3, positions 1 through 3 for me. RJ is going to start at either the 1 or the 2. And if Elliot is also starting, then that means to me it's between Cormac Ryan or Harrison Ingram at the 3. And that's tough, you know, because I can see merit for either of those guys being your starting 3 in that scenario. I think I would probably have to go with Harrison Ingram because of his playmaking. However, as soon as I say that, I almost want to backtrack it because Elliot Cadeau has all that playmaking. And maybe Cormac Ryan is as your more reliable 3-point shooter of the 2 between he and Harrison Ingram. Maybe you want that more scoring punch. That said, I think that's what I would do just to be different than you. I would say Elliot, RJ, Cormac Ryan, Jalen Washington, Armando Bacot. But you say that and you can't see a world where Harrison Ingram's coming off the bench.
Yeah. Well, and to clarify, what I said I think would happen with Harrison starting at the 3 is what I think Hubert Davis will do. Mm-hmm. I actually personally agree with you. I think Harrison's playmaking ability is awesome. When you look at that lineup, I think you desperately need shooting. Yep. And I think Cormac provides that. So personally, I'm in agreement with you. I just like what you mentioned. I don't foresee a world where Harrison Ingram's coming off the bench. So I think Hubert starts him. But yeah, I think you're spot on with that. Shooting is needed in a Elliot Cadeau, RJ Davis, whichever 3-man you want backcourt. So
right. And obviously, again, folks, we're talking in a hypothetical world where Jalen Washington is your starting 4. But it makes me think, I mean, as you see the troubles we're having putting that starting 5 together there, it makes you just think all the more like, is that a reality of Jalen Washington starting? Now, Pac, let's take this a step further beyond what we've just said and think about what would it mean for the rotation. So let's take the Hubert Davis starting lineup that you were suggesting there. Let's go back. Let's live in a world without Elliot Cadeau for a minute, because that's not a reality right now. So in the world where it's RJ Davis, Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, Jalen Washington, and Armando Bacot, who are guys maybe 6 through 9 for you after that?
Well, gosh, this is where it gets tough. I think let's attack the front court first. So we know we have basically at this point in time 4 guys to fill all the front court spots: Armando, Jalen Washington, Jae'lyn Withers, and Zayden High. So those are the 4 we have as of now. I think with Jalen Washington starting at the 4, hypothetically, you've got Withers and you've got High, but they're not really 5. So
yeah, that's where it gets weird to me too.
Yeah, it gets real finicky there. So it's like we've got 3 guys, that could potentially play the 4, and nobody that can play the 5 other than maybe subbing out Bacot, moving Washington to the 5, and letting Withers or High play the 4. So that's really kind of the only way I see that working out. So
yeah, because it's like, can you squeeze enough minutes of Mondo on the bench with Washington playing the 5, and then bring Mondo back in, Washington to the bench, and then either Withers or High at the 4, or play small ball with Ingram at the 4, perhaps, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's where, to me, that keeps this conversation keeps running against the potentiality of having Jalen Washington at the 4 because of that, unless you're able to use one of these final scholarships to bring in a true backup for Armando Bacot at the 5, right? Like that, as we talk about this side of the depth, it makes me think like that's where you need another person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
even then, though, it's like still kind of running against that, because the staff has shown they're looking for a 4 in the fact that they've been pursuing Jarin Stevenson. So it's just kind of like signs are pointing to the fact they expect Washington to back up Bacot. But then again, you never know.
Yeah. So what about at the other position? So we've got you've talked about both Jae'lyn Withers and Zayden High there in that mix for guys 6 through 9. What about in the backcourt?
Yeah, the backcourt, I think, right off the bat, I think you have to look at Simeon, Wilcher, and Seth Trimble as backcourt depth. And then, as far as backing up to 3, if you look back to the front court for a second, I think Jae'lyn Withers can do some of that. I think he can play a little bit of the 3. And then I think Paxton Wojcik can play some 3 and provide something for us. I like his veteranness, and I mean, he averaged 14 points per game at the D1 level, and that's nothing to like laugh at or just brush off. I think he's a player, and
yeah.
I'm not saying I think he'll play a ton,
Yep.
but I think he can provide some minutes at the 3. So those are the 3 guys I kind of look at as being players off the bench for us.
Yeah. Yeah. As I look at 6 through 9, as the roster stands right now, beyond that, imaginary starting 5 of RJ, Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, Jalen Washington, and Armando Bacot, it would be 6 through 9 in some order for me would be Simeon, Wilcher, Seth Trimble, Zayden High, and Jae'lyn Withers, with Wojcik probably the 10th guy on the depth chart at that point. But then, again, you do still have scholarships 11, 12, and 13 to dole out. If you do, right? Like Coach Davis doesn't have to use those. And so we wait to see on that. But I think that's where the depth sits as we stand today. So, Pac, a lot of this conversation about Jae'lyn Withers potentially as a starting 4 comes up because of a video that was posted 35 seconds long last week of Jae'lyn in some workouts and playing. And so I want to unpack, like, in our typical unpacking it segment, what can we really truly glean from a half-minute video like that without getting too out of whack? I want to hear your thoughts on that. Plus, we need to give an update on some postseason action for the baseball team and the men's and women's tennis teams. We'll do all that in just a second. All right, Pac, quickly, before we get into talking about this Jalen Washington kind of hype video from his high school basketball team, first want to update everyone on the baseball team. If you're not up to date on this, ACC tournament's going on right now. The Tar Heels beat Georgia Tech on Tuesday, 11-5. The Bats were alive. Still no Vance Honeycutt. Sounds like we won't have him at all through the ACC tournament. So Carolina will play Virginia, the 2 seed in the tournament, on Thursday, 3 p.m. on ACC Network. Very simply, this is what you got to do. Now that you've beaten Georgia Tech, a win would mean that the Tar Heels move on to the semifinals on Saturday. So simple as that. You got to go win a baseball game. If not, you just wait to find out where you'll play in the region. Now, tennis. You know that the team tennis events are over. Men's and women's teams are competing in the singles and doubles right now. The women's team had 5 singles players in action. Fiona Crawley, unfortunately, is the only one that's left. She has breezed through the first 2 rounds and will face Millie Rajecki from NC State, interestingly enough, in the round of 16 on Wednesday. Even though Carolina and NC State have played 3 times, these 2 ladies haven't faced off this year. Abby Forbes, Reese Brantmeyer, they both lost in the first round. And then Carson Tanguilig and Annika Yarlagada both lost in the second round. Now, doubles action got a little upset by inclement weather again on Tuesday. So as of the time of this recording, there are 2 women's doubles teams in action for the Tar Heels, Crawley and Tanguilig, and then Brantmeyer and Scotty. And as at the time of this recording, neither of those ladies have played yet. And so we'll update you on the next show. On the men's side, unfortunately, both singles players who were in have been beaten out. Ryan Segerman lost to number 2 in the nation, UGA's Ethan Quinn, in the second round, and then Brian Cernock lost 0-6-4-6 in the first round. Same situation there on the doubles side. Carolina has 2 men's doubles teams in action, but the men's doubles action was canceled because of the weather on Tuesday, and so they will play on Wednesday. And that's Segerman along with Kesa Kanaya, and then Cernock with Ben Kate. And so we'll update you on all that action. So, Pac, let's get back to Jalen Washington. I'm sure a lot of people have watched this kind of hype video of him. Again, it's just 35 seconds long. I know a lot of people watched it because I quote tweeted it, and it had a lot of impressions. And here's where I want to start with it. Paul Biancardi, one of ESPN's great, basketball recruiting kind of guys, replied to it and said, quote, "That's bad news for ACC opponents." Pac, is this short video, and I know you've watched it with your coaching eyes, is this short video legitimate enough for Paul Biancardi to make a statement like that?
No. I mean, I'm not.
Tell me why.
I'm not knocking what he's saying, and partially I get it. I mean, it is bad news for ACC opponents if he's healthy and if he can play at a high level. There's no doubt about it. The problem with the video is I don't think he was playing against high-level opponents. So I think it's kind of tough to read into it. Now, there are some things that I feel like you could take away from it.
Okay.
I thought he was moving well. He was shooting the ball well. Saw him get to the rim a couple times. You saw him putting the ball on the floor,
which I like to see that.
Love to see that. That's great. And once again, I don't think the competition was very good.
Right. But it's not Leaky Black guarding him with that ball handling.
Exactly. But it's still good to see those things. And maybe the best takeaway of all is, hey, Jalen Washington is healthy enough to go out and play pickup ball without worrying about tearing his knees up. And if he feels comfortable enough to go play pickup ball, then I would imagine we're not going to have to worry about a minute restriction in when he's playing at North Carolina this upcoming season. This past year, it kind of felt like, Jalen, get out there, and about the time he gets comfortable, we pull him out because I'm assuming they're pulling him out because they were concerned about his knee, or maybe they were just trying to keep him in limited minutes.
Yeah.
Because of that, at least that's what it felt like sometimes. But if he's out, with his high school basketball team or former high school basketball team playing pickup ball, I assume that means he's fully healthy and good to go, which is a great sign for North Carolina.
Pac, I know this happens a lot. We get these little snippets of videos in the off season, and it's great because it engenders excitement, and it's like, yeah, they're doing stuff. But I almost compare this to you have Late Night with Roy. What's it called now with Live Action with Hubert Davis? And last year, Bo May hit a couple threes, and everyone's like, oh man, Bo May is going to be coming in off the bench. He might knock down a couple. And, how many minutes did he actually play last year? And so could you help properly contextualize this video? What level of excitement, or just yeah, that's nice, but whatever, should fans watch that and have?
Well, you really just got to look at the scenario. There's no pressure. He's out there in a gym or complex playing pickup against what I'm assuming is former high school teammates or something, because it came from his high school basketball account. And so when you look at that, you go, okay, he's playing guys smaller than him, younger than him, and probably less capable than him, because he is a Division I basketball player. And then, you got to really look at it from a college basketball standpoint too. When it's a game that's being broadcast on ESPN and there's 20,000 people sitting in the stands of the Dean Dome going crazy, it's probably a little tougher to hit a shot. So I think that you got to really provide context to the video. And then, there are some good things you can take away. Like I mentioned, just the fact that he's out there looking healthy, he's moving around, hitting shots, putting the ball on the floor. It's great to see. It really is. But now we need to see it against Clemson and Virginia and Duke and NC State. And then we can be like, okay, he's back. He's healthy. He's good to go. But until then, I think we need to take just a little bit of caution with that.
Yeah. And that's what everyone wants to see, right? You've seen, I think about Sterling Manley and all the issues he had with his lower body. And you really are hopeful for Jalen Washington that health is going to be there, and that all this work he's put in is going to be able to pay off, and that he'll be fully ready to go. And so I watch it with hopeful joy in my heart that he will be a major contributor, maybe as a starter, maybe as a solid backup for the upcoming basketball season for North Carolina. Pac, it's always great to be together. Hopefully you folks enjoyed the show as always and are able to help. I love Pac's words there to help contextualize that video a little bit. Get excited, but temper that excitement just a little bit. If you would, go leave the show a review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere else. 5 stars. Been loving the reviews that have been rolling in. Thank you all so much. Very kind. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Heels. Follow Pac at Coach_K23, and you can follow me at Isaac Schade. If you'd like to have more in-depth conversation, you can email the show lockedontarheels@gmail.com. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to the show, smash the like button, and comment. Speaking of subscribing, Locked On College Basketball is almost up to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and when it gets there, this hair, all these long curls are coming off. I'm getting that summer buzz, and I'm going to be ready to go. So if you love my hair, I'm sorry it's going. If you hate my hair, which I've heard in the comments sometimes, congrats to you. It's about to be gone. Friends, thanks so much for tuning in on this Wednesday to talk with me and Pac about Carolina athletics. Always great stuff. Love to do it. Want to remind you that it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Pac, as we sign off, I was laughing. Somebody put a comment in, I don't know if you saw it on YouTube last week, that their favorite moment of every Wednesday show is waiting to see if you get your peace signs up in time. I love it so much, man. This is so much fun. So, we're going to talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace.